back, relax, and let's have a chapter chat. I'm your host, Jessica Foster, and if you love historical fiction and you're interested in the Titanic, today's episode is going to be for you. We have best-selling author Donna Jones Alward visiting all the way from Canada. Hi, Donna.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. We do want to talk about your latest novel, Ship of Dreams. It's historical fiction about the Titanic. Give us a brief synopsis about Ship of Dreams.
All right, well, Ship of Dreams is the story of two best friends, so Hannah and Louisa, and they are journeying to New York on Titanic. Hannah is, her husband is also with them. Uh, she's on board trying to save her marriage after something pretty devastating had happened. And of course, when you're trying to save your marriage, you want to take your best friend to third wheel. Louisa is on board actually to avoid marriage. She's a suffragette and a bit of a firecracker. And so they're two very different women. The whole idea is when they're in New York, Hannah's husband will be doing some business things. And so this gives Hannah and Lou a chance to hang out and have what we would call a girls' week. And, of course, all of those plans, go awry on the evening of April 14th.
And what made you want to write a historical fiction novel about the Titanic?
A couple of things, really. I mean, there's such a universal fascination with this incident and this tragedy, and so that's kind of attractive at the when you're looking at, where you might wanna set your historical fiction. But also, I'd written a book about the Halifax explosion, which a lot of people don't know about and happened actually 5 years after the Titanic here in Halifax. And when I was researching that, there were so many little things that called back to what happened with Titanic and the Halifax connection that I really felt like it was almost a no-brainer. Like once I get into researching that story, I'm like, oh yeah, the next one's going to be Titanic. So I think that's what led me there. And then once I started the research, it's so fascinating.
So I actually visited Halifax not long ago and learned about the explosion. And before I visited that area, I had never heard of it before. And so that's what's so fascinating about historical fiction is that it brings to life some history that we didn't know about a lot of times.
Yeah, and a lot of Canadians don't even know a lot about the Halifax explosion. So this was my way of bringing that to life. And there's a really great museum here called the Museum of the Atlantic, the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. And so there's a permanent um, explosion exhibit on the first floor. But then on the second floor, there's a permanent Titanic exhibit. And so if I would go to research something, I mean, I'm not just going to go to the first floor.
Right.
And so I really just, got intrigued with the whole event. And then, of course, the Nova Scotia connection, which again, a lot of people don't realize, but, the bodies that were recovered were brought here. And we have a huge grave site here. And a forensic method was developed here that is still being used, called the Barnstead method. And so there are a lot of really great connections here, and it's a little chance to showcase my corner of the world in a much bigger context.
Right. I actually visited that museum. It's a great museum.
Yeah, and a lot of cruise ships come in here during the summer and the fall as well, and that whole downtown core and lots of other areas as well within Nova Scotia. But there's so much heritage here for people to explore. And if you only have a day, perhaps coming off a cruise ship, there's just so much downtown that you can walk to.
Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful area. And while the Halifax explosion is something that maybe a lot of people don't know about, Titanic is familiar
Yeah,
to most people.
yeah.
When you were researching it, was there anything that you found out that just blew your mind?
I don't think there's a whole lot that blew my mind. I think, just the overall scope of things and, some of the little details like, the dogs that were on board. Some of the first class passengers traveled with pets. Um, eh, it's just some of the food, little thing I think it was the little details that got me a lot. So, you would expect there to be fresh flowers, but there were a lot of fresh flowers because there was new paint smell, because the ship was so new. And I think the whole idea of, when my characters walked on board, I suddenly realized, you know, these people were the very first people that would eat off and as we found out later, the only, but that would walk those halls and sleep in those beds and uh, eat from that china. And it was just really sobering to think that, the plans for this ship were so huge and it didn't even make one crossing. It was,
I know. It when you think back to it, I can't even imagine the extreme joy that people had coming on the ship and the awe, and then contrast that to the tragedy that happened. I mean, what
yeah.
a range of emotion and experience.
It's actually one of the things I like to play with in my writing. So, I'll play light off of dark or tragedy off of laughter or, you know, just some ironies. Like so many of the first class men did not make it. They were not picked up. They because it was women and children first. And when you think about how much money collectively was on, in first class on that ship, and yet all the money in the world couldn't buy their safety. It could buy them almost anything else, but it couldn't buy their safety. And I think that's just such an interesting concept when you sit down and think about it. So I like playing with that in my writing a lot.
And when you just said that, that just gave me chills because it's so true. They always
Yeah.
say money can't buy you happiness, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it couldn't buy you a spot in a lifeboat either, so,
No.
and, a few people did make it off, they either snuck off or, each boat needed to have a crew member and, someone to row, and so there were a handful of men, of course, that did make it off ship, but you look at the Astors and the Guggenheims and Isidor Straus and some of these, crazy rich men, and, they went down with the ship.
In Ship of Dreams, is there a particular character that you really connect with?
You know, my my last 2 historical fiction, books, the main characters have been 2 women, and so I get this question a lot, like, do you relate to, Nora or Charlotte? Do you relate to Hannah or Lou more? And there is always one that I relate to more, but my female characters in particular are always a blend of me. Like, we all have different sides to ourselves, so Hannah is more marriage and family oriented, and I'm happy. Like I'm very much about family, and I'm a nurturer at heart, so I get that. But I'm also pretty passionate about women's rights, and I can be really sarcastic, and I think just that fun personality of Lou. Like I loved writing Lou's character. I loved it. Yeah, so Lou was the one I kind of gravitate to more, but I think Hannah lives in my heart too.
Well, of course, and we are all, as individuals, a blend of many different things, so I love that you
Yeah.
blend those characters, and, I think that you did a great job with character development as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I write character-based stories, so so I would hope that would be the case. I do tend to be more character-based than plot-based, and what happens comes from within the characters and how they respond to whatever life is throwing at them, and so yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's talk a little bit about your planning process. How much research did you do? How long did it take you to write the book? Are you more of an outliner? Just walk us through that process.
I do a lot of research up front, so probably at least 4 months of research, and I'm not an outliner per se. Now, when you're dealing with historical fiction, you are restrained by a timeline, and so you want to make sure that things happen, according to, what happened in history and to stay with the actual facts. Like, you do have to plan your story around that, but when it comes to the actual story itself that is about the characters, I tend to, and I don't wanna say wing it, but I'm more of a pantser, you fly by the seat of your pants, and, yeah, and I don't outline chapter by chapter or, everything that's going to happen. I let the characters lead me, and I often find that's sort of where the magic happens. So it's a blend of both.
Do you ever go to bed at night after writing and say, I wonder what's going to happen to that character tomorrow?
It's not so much I wonder what's going to happen, it's more, "Okay, tomorrow I have to do this."
Hmm.
And then I'm very in the moment with my stories, and, you hear about people keeping a notebook by the bed,
Yeah.
and if they wake up and they'll, jot things down, and I never do that. Sleep is a really precious commodity to me, and it will take an earthquake to get me out of bed in the middle of the night, basically. So I always do the thing where, if it's really important, I'll remember it in the morning, and if it's not, it either wasn't important or it'll come to me again later as I'm writing. And I know there's probably a lot of writers out there horrified by the fact that I let those ideas and things pass me by, but I believe in them. So if they're meant to be, they'll come back to me.
I love that. I always joke that some of my best ideas come when I'm in the shower.
Yeah, for me, it's walking.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm out walking, so if I have a story problem that I'm having a hard time solving, I'll go out for a walk. I'm very nature driven and,
Mhm.
being outside, so I'll go out for, like, an hour walk, and then by about 45 minutes in, I'll probably have the solution.
Well, Canada is so beautiful that getting outside in nature, I'm sure that that does really get your creative juices flowing.
It does, and I'm also introverted, which surprises a lot of people because I'm not shy, but I do need to recharge my batteries, and so sunshine and fresh air and, um, not being we don't live in the city, so, just going out and sitting on my deck and really just hearing the birds and that kinda thing is kinda how I recharge my batteries.
And you have pets, right?
We have 3 cats at the moment.
I thought you did, and I'm a cat person myself, and we have 3
Mhm.
cats at home also. That's actually the most I've ever had at once, but
Same.
so we had this segment on our news program where they would bring in pets that needed adopting from the shelter.
That's so
And
dangerous.
isn't it? I kept feeling so sorry for them, and I would just bond with them, and then the next thing you know, we've got a new family member, and my daughter, she was like,
I
"Oh,
can't do
mommy,
that.
yeah, we have to save them," and my husband's like, "Another? Another?" And we're like, "Another. Yes."
Yeah, and no, I think now, like, my husband would put the brakes on that. That would not be a thing. He kind of has a rule where it's not an add to, it's a replace policy. So
Right.
our oldest boy is 13, so he's been around for a while, and then, we have 2 other kitties that are 3. They're the same age, and they're 3, and all 3 are very different personalities, so it makes it interesting here.
Yeah, we have all of our cats are very different personalities too. One of them, we call him our little old man. His name is Ozzy,
Yeah.
and when we adopted him, he was already on the older side, and he had just kind of not had the best life, and we wanted to give him a great life in his elder years, and so
Mhm.
So we brought Ozzy into our family, and he's our little old man. And then the other
I love
2,
that.
yeah, he's sweet, so sweet. And you could tell that he had a little bit of a tough life because it took him a while to warm up. But now every morning he sits with me while I do my makeup and will not move, and he's very much wants to be around all of us, and so it's been a little beautiful bonding experience with him.
I think the younger 2 are more of a bonded pair kind of situation. They were adopted together, so that makes a difference, but our older guy, we had another cat, and so, he and Boo were together a fair amount, and then for a while, it was just him,
Oh.
and he's very loving, so he's the kind that will get up and at night, if I'm reading or whatever, he'll get up and, headbutt my shoulder and be like, "Hello, it's loving time."
Well, isn't it just so perfect for, a writer and a reader to have cats at their home? I mean, that's cozy, right?
It is cozy, and we also had a dog for a while and for 10 years, and, I miss having a dog, but I also find I'm more tied with a dog. My husband works shift work, and, I travel a bit for this job, so, sometimes I'll be on tour or, I'll be doing research trips or whatever, so it does make it a little more difficult, or sometimes we'll just wanna, like, pick up and take off for a few days, and you can't really do that with a dog. So we have hesitated, getting another dog. Um, but who knows? I mean, I carry dog biscuits in my coat when I go walking
Oh.
so that I can, like, give treats to the neighborhood dogs when I go out. So I think I'm just an animal person, like, period. But, if we wanna bring this back back to the book a little bit,
Yeah.
if you look at the Astors, Madeline and JJ Astor, who were on their way back from their honeymoon, but they took, his dog with them, Kitty, and Kitty was on the ship, and Kitty had been, with them in Egypt and, actually had a little adventure of its own, so, yeah, it was really interesting to read about that, and, a couple of other families who were, traveling with their pets, and they were actually planning, for I think the next day, they were going to have a little impromptu dog show on the first class deck, with the dogs that were on board. So, and I do feel not equally sad, because, people lost families that night. But I also feel sad knowing that, these dogs were on board and there was no way that they were going to be saved, except for one that was hidden away in, its owner's coat on a lifeboat, just a little one. But yeah, they did not make it, and the story goes that, um, someone and it's said often that it was JJ Astor who did it, but went down and, let the dogs out of their kennels and let them come up on deck, before the ship went down.
That's just heartbreaking, isn't it?
I know, I know.
There's just so many layers to this story, and that's why it lends itself so well to a historical fiction novel, and I think that you've done just a beautiful job in Ship of Dreams. I know that those who haven't read it yet, you need to pick up a copy because you are definitely going to enjoy it. But you didn't always write historical fiction. You have
No,
a romance background.
I do. I wrote romance for almost 20 years and, published, I think it was 67, 65, 67, somewhere in there. Yeah, I wrote for Harlequin and St. Martin's Press and a couple of small presses as I was starting out and, yeah, built actually quite a career that way and then made the switch, right around when we went into lockdown from the pandemic.
And how has that switch been? Has it been difficult, easy?
Um, Different. I was looking for a new challenge and wanting to write something other than romance, and not that I didn't love it, but I've been doing it for a long time and was looking at just sort of broadening those horizons, and an opportunity came my way. And I thought, if I do it and I fail, then oh well, I'll do something else. Failure's not the end of anything. And then, because I've always loved historical fiction as well, like as a reader, and it really just intimidated me, so I'd never tried it. And then I just thought, I'm always going to regret it if I don't take advantage of this and give it a try. And then I absolutely fell in love with it. And it is challenging, and there was a bit of a learning curve. Um, and how I market it even is different. And so there's a lot that's different, but it's also like I don't see myself going back right away, or or trying to blend the two. Maybe I will
Right.
at some point. But I'm just very happy doing what I'm doing right now. So I think that's where I'm going to stay for a while.
Do you feel like that romance genre, um, the books recently are a little bit different than, say, books 20 years ago?
Yeah, I think whenever you read a book, not just romance, but any sort of book that is published, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you end up picking up on the zeitgeist of the time, really, and what's happening within the world and our attitudes and technology and slang and all kinds of things. And I think especially in the last probably 5 to 10 years, I think there's been a much bigger focus on things like consent.
Yes.
Um, and there have been a lot of diverse romances that have popped up, which are fantastic. As we all know, sports romance is having a moment. I live about, I don't know, probably 20 minutes from Rachel Reed. So the heated rivalry craze, she's local to us. So
Mhm.
we're really proud of that. And romantic comedy is having a moment, but everything is cyclical. So I think anytime you read romance from the past, you realize, oh yeah, this was written in 2007. This is different. There are things that'll be different than something that you read in 2026.
And I think I've noticed that more in that romance genre than, say, historical fiction, because with historical fiction, you're having to write it within the time frame of history.
Right.
So it's that time frame. But with romance, it's more in the moment. And so you see the societal
Yeah.
contrasts.
Yeah, and I think, well, and even romance has its subgenres, right? So you have historical romance, which is going to be the same thing. You have paranormal and fantasy and romantasy right now, which is also having a huge moment. It's not just contemporary. So I think you'll see those things. And even in my historical fiction, if we look at themes, in Ship of Dreams, one of the big themes is friendship and that whole dynamic, and also women helping other women. And that was intentional. That's a big thing for me right now. And, lifting other women up. And that's an important theme. And so you can take those themes that are sort of universal and apply them to any time period. You just have to make sure that they're true to the period in which you're writing. Um, So yeah, I really loved having Lou be the suffragette, Hannah being a little quieter, but then those other passengers on board that we knew were outliers, like Margaret Brown, Helen Churchill Candy, Rena Harris, who were doing incredible things as women, even in that time period, and them sort of reaching a hand back to say, welcome, you're included in this, and let us help lift you up. And so that was something I really wanted to touch on when I was writing Ship of Dreams.
And something that I also pick up on with historical fiction is that a lot of times you can look back and you can see that some issues that were issues back in a time period way, way, way long ago can sometimes surface again, and maybe in a little bit of a different
Yep.
way, but still there.
Sure.
And that's enlightening.
It is, yeah, you'll see the same issue just in a different time the context of a different time period, and it's fascinating and for me also frustrating because when we look at women's issues, we're like, "Are we still doing this? Like, why are we still doing this?" And, in 1912, they were looking at wage parity. We still don't have wage parity. And yes, we have the vote, but there's a lot with women's rights that we've come a long, long way, but there are some things that we still are fighting for. So um, that's something that that's when I said that Lou is like me in some ways. That is how.
Yeah, the wage parity, that is still so interesting, isn't it?
I know, and so if we look back at that time, we're looking at a lot of, industry and especially before the turn of the century as well, because the suffragette movement didn't just pop up, in the early 1900s. This was going on, before the turn of the century, and you have women working in factories, making far less than the men doing the exact same job, and, that's like that. So we've been fighting that for a long, long time.
Yes, and it's important for us to read about history because I always say if you don't read about it, it can repeat
Yep.
itself, or it can also open your eyes
Yep.
to, "Hey, this is still an issue."
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, so it's Freedom to Read Week here in Canada, and, I think looking at, societally where we are and being able to look back at our past and look at that context and hopefully see the red flags and move forward from that, I think that's really important.
Yes, I do too, and Donna, what do you hope that readers get out of Ship of Dreams?
I mean, I hope that they come away from this story, um, with a sense this is gonna sound so weird because it's about Titanic, but with a sense of hope. And, as dark as this tragedy is, it's also about resilience and love and, Hannah and Lou's friendship and how it endures. It's also about acceptance. Like, I don't wanna give the ending away, but when you read the ending, people you have to accept people for who they are, and meet them where they're at and, love them anyway. And I think that was big for me with Hannah and Lou. And also, so for readers that are going to experience this for the first time, when you get to the end, there is a little bit of a hint about what's coming next, which is really fun. I discovered at the end that I was not quite done with some of the characters in this story, and so they will appear, actually in my next book, which will be out next year.
And if you have not read Ship of Dreams, go ahead and read it because it looks like we've got a part 2 coming up.
Yeah, it'll be set, World War II, and, there's a Canadian element, and, it's maybe a little more plot heavy, but, it's being very fun to write.
Wonderful. Well, next time I come to Canada, I'm gonna look you up, okay?
Yes, come on a cruise ship.
I'll just make sure it doesn't have an ending like the Titanic, right? It's gonna be a safe one.
No joke.
Thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Chapter Chat. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Happy reading!